Elias awoke with a start, his bedsheets sticking to his back as he rose. Such terrifying visions of the past returned once more to frighten his scarred mind. He ran a hand through his sweaty brown hair with a sigh, and pushed himself out of his soaked bed. With the pitter-patter of bare feet, he walked across the cold wooden floor to his closet, which was, without much surprise, also wooden. The door of the closet creaked as the young man opened it, the sound of steel hinges weeping to be greased. The human's ears paid the weeping no mind, however, reaching for his clothes instead. A linen tunic, as well as linen pants, were what he pulled first, donning his fairly simple garb with a wiping motion to haphazardly clean the residual dust. His eyes panned down to the base of his closet, where his leather boots sat. He snatched them up, putting them on as quickly as possible. Elias sighed. His eyes still panned through the closet. Where did I put it? Eventually, his eyes fell on what he was seeking. A steel short sword, hanging from the corner of his closet. His father's blade. The young human's eyes quickly darted to see the sword's scabbard lying unceremoniously on the ground below the blade itself. He grabbed the sword by its leather-wrapped hilt, unlatching it from its hook, and slid it into the sheath. The belt and sword were equipped together. Now all that remained was his armor, which was hanging on the left side of his closet. I wish I had a system for laying this out, he muttered, growing irritated, as was common with his own lack of organization. He grabbed the studded leather chest piece, the leggings, and the steel braces and greaves to accompany. It was a long process to equip this armor, as it was normally meant for two to effectively equip it on someone. It took the young man over 15 minutes simply to get the cuirass and leggings on, which really was the most difficult part. The bracers and greaves were simple. Once this was all done, he equipped the steel gorget, which lay over the upper portion of his cuirass, to top off his set of armor. A quick roll of his shoulders would be certain that the armor was properly in place. He patted himself down, making sure there wasn't any odd leather folding over. All the while, his eyes darted to the door of his small home, ever weary of the loud sounds of the morning hustle and bustle. Once satisfied with the armor's positioning, and with how well fitted it was, he made his way out the door, immediately greeted by the morning light of Souther Hall. He raised a hand over his eyes, as if to block out the harsh light of Rosier ineffectively, which shone down on his fair-skinned form. As his eyes adjusted to the harsh light of day, the first thing he noticed made his blood run cold. The witch hunters were on the prowl. Not only that, but it seemed they had found prey this day. Elias's eyes met that of a woman, stripped of clothes, belongings, and pride, steel gag covering her mouth as if to defend against any foul incantations or spells. When his eyes met hers, he saw no malice in her, simply fear. She was led along via a chain leash attached to her neck, which led down to shackles binding her wrists. Being led to the square for judgment, no doubt. The young man quickly broke eye contact. One must not pity the heretic, lest they fall prey to the black-armored hunters themselves. The hunter's garb was grim and oppressive, black coats of plates over mail, various devices of combat and torture rattling on their belts, and dark hoods drawn over their heads. Some even wore plain metal masks to obscure their features. The armored young man gave one of the grimly adorned hunters a curt nod. The hunter responded in kind. "Evil never rests, my friend," the witch hunter said. His words were laden with judgment and cold, unfeeling duty. Elias politely nodded in response. "Indeed, you do Etros' work." The hunters always filled the young man with paranoia. Their duty was a known thing, but their way of handling it was clandestine, only acting when they had found their prey. Thus, their arrival was always unexpected, causing their very presence to strike fear into even the most righteous of men. But best not to linger on such things. there was work to do. Elias worked his way west, toward the gates leading to the Reclaimers' Road. He could hear his leather boots click on the cobblestone walkways, and did his best to focus on this as he walked towards the city gates. Eventually, the sound of his footfalls were overpowered by the sounds of a man shouting in a salesman-like voice. Work. The shouting led to a rather large pack of individuals huddled around a rather portly man standing atop something indeterminable. Elias bet it was a wooden box. As he approached the crowd, some of the faces turned to him and nodded, parting ever so slightly to allow room. It was now that he could make out the tail end of the man's sales pitch. A small group of individuals to accompany this caravan to Lillian's kingdom. There was silence for a moment as the portly man looked quickly through the crowd. Finally, a hard voice yelled out from the crowd. Lillian's kingdom's a 3 weeks' journey westward. What's the pay looking like for this job, eh? The round man pointed in the general direction. Well, I'm glad you asked. I will be paying 100 crowns each, up front, and another 1,000 upon arrival. The man's speech was elegant and presumably rehearsed. A mumble rolled through the crowd. A rather plump armored man turned to Elias as he walked from the group. I can smell a bad deal here. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving, including Elias, 5 interested individuals. A golden-haired woman in studded leather, a burly man with a chest guard, armored skirt, and a very large battle-axe, a short and stout man wielding a hand hammer and a buckler, and, finally, a man who appeared rather strong in arm, but with a gut of his own, and with what appeared to be a flail slung over his shoulder. The portly trader, who Elias could now see was, indeed, standing on a wooden box, looked around at the 5. That's all? You're all that's interested? Well, I thought my deal was rather splendid. The axe-wielding man spoke up once again. The way I figure it, you's paying us a low entry fee 'cause we're expendable. And if anyone is able to get you to your destination, they earn the clingety-cling, yeah? The merchant pointed in response. Exactly, I'm glad you understand. But you're not expendable, per se. I just want to protect my assets proper. Elias was next to speak up. The road to Lillian's kingdom is long, but hardly dangerous. Why is the final payment so high? The Knights of the Dawn and Vigil patrol the roads rather regularly. The round traitor shook his head, jowls flopping about. I'm not going to trust my merchandise's well-being with whether or not the Knights of the Dawn patrolled the road recently. I'd rather have my goods in the hands of reliable and, well-paid, mind you, mercenaries. Does that make sense to you? Elias raised an eyebrow. Something here stunk, and he couldn't put his finger on it. Sure. Sounds all right to me. The merchant smiled widely. Excellent! His sentence was cut off by the golden-haired woman, who spoke clearly and elegantly. What merchandise are you transporting, exactly, if you're so worried about being robbed? Usually, the merchants to wander the Reclaimers' Road aren't so openly worried about being robbed, and openly willing to pay random mercenaries an absurd amount of crowns in exchange for protection. This is far from the standard fee, I must say. The trader, having been cut off, was now slightly flustered. What does it matter what I carry? What matters is I have a very rational concern of violent criminals and creatures on the roadway. Does that make sense to you? The woman was silent for several moments, staring at the merchant. Makes sense to me, I suppose. The merchant relaxed and gave a forced salesman-like smile. Then we'll have a lovely journey together, won't we? Come! Let me show you all the caravan.